record button. Cool. So thank you so much, Martin. This is pretty cool. And thank you to Sam as well from Hancock's NZ for arranging this while global travel is still a bit troubled, let's say. But it's good we can do Zoom calls and have, a session with gentlemen like yourself. So I'll hand it over to you. We'll hear some stories and some yarns, and we'll keep the questions to the end if it's okay.
Yeah.
We have lots of time with Martin. There's no shortage of time. So
no.
Yeah. Cool.
Good. Well, thank you very much. My name is Martin, and I'm the senior brand ambassador for Highland Park, which basically just means, well, senior, I'm old, and brand ambassador, I have to drink whiskey. So it's not a bad title to have. I've been working in the business for 32 years. For the last 16 years for Highland Park, and been working at different distilleries in production, everything from malting, warehousing, to now do some of the blending and bottling for Highland Park. So I'm going to talk you through a bit about Highland Park, what's important for us, and why we are different. Start out a little bit about our location, some about our people, which we just talked a little bit about our whiskey, of course, and if you have any question, fire on in the chat or at the end where we open up for questions, and we will do some tastings as well at the end as well. But to Highland Park and our location, we just had Ash and I a talk about how to get there, and to get to Orkney is not that easy. It's easy to come over to Scotland, but it's not easy to make it all the way to Orkney. There's two ways you can get there, either by ferry or by plane. And the thing is, if you want to go by plane, you can fly from Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, or Inverness, but every second to third flight will be cancelled. So the thing is, if you decide to fly, you might actually never go, and if you go, you might never leave, which is not too bad, to be honest. On the other hand, if you take the ferry, the waters between mainland Scotland and Orkney is horrendous. It's simply one of the wildest water you can find, because it's where the Atlantic Ocean meets the North Sea, and it's quite a heavy wind. 3 years ago, the ferry was stuck in between, right in the middle of the sea between mainland Scotland and the Orkney Islands for 3 days, where they couldn't get back or forward. So it's and let me just tell you, the food on board is not something to be very, very happy about. So it was 3 very long days for the guys that were on board that ferry. But when you get there, some amazing islands to visit. Besides Highland Park, there's another distillery called Scarpa, and then there's all these historical things. So basically, Orkney is a group of islands, 70 islands, in fact, where only 21 of the islands are inhabited, and that's the kind of the official number, I would say. If you ask an Acadian, a man or a woman born in Orkney, they will tell you a little bit different, some different numbers. When I first came up to Orkney many years ago, there was no 2 years that the numbers were the same. And if you just go back a few years here, in 2016, there was 38 islands, but in 2018, there was 48 islands. And you might think, how can that happen? And it's a very, very simple measurement they do, because in Orkney, an island is only an island if a sheep can live there without human interference for more than a year. And that means basically, if you come to one of those islands and the sheep is still alive, that means there was grass enough to feed the sheep for a year. But if you come back and the sheep is dead, it's just a stone in the water. And that's how they measure it and still do. And it goes all the way back to when the Vikings used to live there. So quite an old way to measure it, but it still works for them. And it's one of these good things that's different about the Orkney Islands. Besides the 70 islands and the 21 that are inhabited, as I mentioned, we have Highland Park. We have a distillery called Scarpa. There's two breweries. There's all these historical sites you will find around, like one of the oldest villages in the world called Scarpa Bay. We have Scarpa Flow, where the German fleet sank their ships after the First World War. So if you like to go scuba diving, absolutely fantastic place to scuba dive as well. And then we have the Cliff of Jesneby. And the Cliffs of Jesneby is the most western point in Orkney. And this is where, if you can imagine, the Atlantic Ocean and the North Sea now and again have a fight about who's the strongest sea in the world. And that fight always takes place in Orkney and at the Cliffs of Jesneby. So this is where we have wind speeds up to 110 miles per hour, about 80 hours a year. And one of the reasons that you will never see trees in Orkney, because the wind is simply too heavy. And if you go up north on the Orkney Islands, between two islands called Westray and Papa Westray, you will find the shortest commercial flight route in the world. It's in air 3 times a day. And the average flying time, well, let me say, it's scheduled to be 2 minutes. So in air, but the average flying time is 90 seconds. And about 5 years ago, the record was broken by a captain that used to be a fighter pilot, and he flew the distance in 46 seconds. And after his flight, they decided never to serve coffee on board anymore. So there's absolutely no service on that flight, but still a very commercial flight, and was actually made to get children from one island to the other because the stream is simply so heavy between the two islands next to each other. So that was a little bit about Orkney today. Going back in time, one of the reasons that we talk so much about the Vikings back in the days were that the Vikings came from Denmark and Norway to Orkney in around 750 to 800, we believe they arrived, and they took over the islands, and it was under Danish and Norwegian rules until 1472. And in 1472, it was handed over due to a marriage between the Danish princess and the Scottish prince. And the Danish king had to pay a dowry to get his daughter married. Unfortunately, King Christian had no money at all. He had no gold because the 60,000 florins, the currency at that time, were the same as 120 kilograms of pure gold. But the king had no money, he had no gold, so he had to give something else away, and he gave away Orkney. And Orkney became Scottish in 1472. The thing is that it was, we never found a letter or anything handwriting that it was handed over. It was just a handshake and thank you very much. Now I own some islands. So in fact, in 2014, where some of you might remember, they had the referendum in Scotland, where Scotland, William Wallace, Braveheart, came back and said, we need freedom. We don't want to be part of the British Empire anymore. We want to be our own. So they voted, and it became a no. If it had been a yes, Denmark and Norway could in fact have bought back the Orkney Islands. And the price for the Orkney Islands back in that time was £8,000, which is a bargain. But so both Denmark and Norway said, well, we're going to buy it. But until the government, of course, in Scotland said, well, guys, that's only for the land. You need to pay for houses, hospitals, roads, and for the tax that people have paid since 1472, which then became $48 billion. So Denmark said, no, thank you. But Norway said, yes, we'll take it. But then it became a no. Otherwise, you would today been drinking the best Norwegian whiskey in the world. And we don't like the sound of that. We still like it to be Scottish. So looking at that, of course, today there will still be descendants from the Vikings. And actually, in fact, we made some DNA tests some years back, and over a third of the people living in Orkney today can trace their bloodline, their DNA, straight back to the Vikings. And that's one of the reasons you still find names in Orkney that goes back to the Nordics, like Harald, Sigurd, Thorfinn, Magnus, Ragnhild, and all these Nordic names. And that brings us to our founder, which again, not a really typical Scottish name, Magnus Jönsson. Magnus is actually most used in Sweden, with the recent count was 82,000 people with the name Magnus. In Great Britain, there's only 14 at the moment with the name Magnus, and one of them is actually a girl, which I don't know why, but so it's definitely a Swedish name. And Jönsson comes from the Swedish surname Jönsson. So Magnus would have been from a Swedish family that came up probably as Vikings as well and settled down. And over the years, he became a Jönsson instead of a Jönsson. Magnus was a very clever man. He had 3 jobs. He was during the daytime a butcher. At night, he was a smuggler, an illicit distiller. And then every Sunday, he worked for the church. And working for the church, making whiskey, not good. Because whiskey was known to be called the devil's dram back in 1798. So working for the church, making the devil's dram, definitely not good. But we know that Magnus did not work for the church because he believed in God. Magnus worked for the church because he needed a place to hide his whiskey. And what better place to hide the whiskey in the church, as the gaugers, the custom and excise people back then, were called the devil's men, and they were not allowed to enter the church. So it was a very, very safe hiding place. So if you imagine you entered the church on a Sunday, Magnus would be there to welcome you. He would be there to hand over the songbook, show you to the seats, and he would probably even be the man that would step out and say things like, "Thou shalt not kill," or "Thou shalt not steal," "Thou shalt not make whiskey because that's illegal." And people believed him. But, well, I would say half the church believed him, because the other half was actually only there to buy his whiskey. So after Magnus closed down the church, people would meet him at the back door of the church, where he would pick out the small bottles, the small casks, hand it over to the people that paid him. And that was how he managed to do it. So he hid the whiskey under the pulpit of the church, holes in the walls, and even in old coffins, and made it through the years until he got caught in 1798. 1798, he had to pay a license to produce whiskey, which he did. And after a few years, he said, well, I don't really want to pay for something I produce myself out of my own barley, yeast, and water. So he refused to pay it, and got caught in 1813 by a man called James Robertson. And James Robertson gave Magnus 2 choices: either to leave Orkney for good or go to jail. And Magnus decided that it might be, as infamous as he was, good to leave Orkney for good. And that's what he did. He moved to the mainland, left behind him his little bothy, a little bit, a house on a hill called High Park. He left behind him his distilling equipment and moved away. James Robertson fell in love with Orkney and moved into Magnus Jonsson's little house, took over his distilling equipment, and became the legal owner of Highland Park single malt whiskey in 1826. So he didn't pay a license for the first 13 years he owned the distillery, where we know he did produce whiskey. So the Custom and Excise officer that eventually caught Magnus distilling didn't pay a license himself for the first 13 years. So that tells a little bit about Custom and Excise people as well, how they work. So we're now talking a little bit about the distillery. And the distillery, as I said, was founded on High Park back in 1798. And High Park was the highest point outside Kirkwall, which is the capital kind of thing of Orkney. And here, Magnus built his little house and his little distillery. As I said, it was called High Park to begin with, later known as Highland Park. The first time we actually see the first real document of the wording Highland Park is in Alfred Bernard's book, The Distilleries of United Kingdom, that came out in the late 1880s. But if you look at the Orkneys today, we had High Park in the old days. We had the Low Park, which was down by the sea, East Park, West Park, and so on. So they were all divided up in these small parks and areas. Today, we don't use these areas anymore. Highland Park Orkney has been too big, and it's divided into different communities. And already in about 120 years ago, they started talking about two different sides. They start talking about the Ubis and the Dunis. I don't know if any one of you have heard about a game. I know you have a violent game in New Zealand, a football game there. Sounds, looks really good when you play that. Not like American football, but a good way of rugby. But in Orkney, they had a game called a bar, and we still play that 2 times a year. And the bar game, which is spelled B-A, is, according to Guinness Book of Records, the most violent ball game in the world. And it's played on Christmas days and New Year's Day between the Ubis and the Dunis. And Ubis means simply up the street, which were the farmers, and Dunis were down the street, which was the fishermen's. And they're meeting 2 times a year, Christmas days and New Year's Day. And there's about 120 people on each team. They meet in front of the cathedral, and they're not wearing colors as we know it from football or rugby. They come as they are. So you really need to know your friends, your teammates. And then it's up to the Dunis to get the ball into the water, and the Ubis to get the ball to the west side of Kirkwall. And basically, there are no rules. There's not a referee walking around with a whistle and blows when something do anything wrong. No, there's unwritten rules, like if a man is lying down, you are not allowed to kick him. You're allowed to stand on him, but you can't kick him. And then another more important rule is that as a game can take everything from 15 minutes to 8 hours, if it still continues after 4 hours, half the team is allowed to go to the local pub while the other half is playing. And that means that after 4 hours, I can tell you, the game is much more exciting. So the bar game, look it up on YouTube. It's absolutely hilarious, and it's still played. And it's I often been asked, because I'm a 120 kilogram guy, if I participated, and I haven't. I might be big, but I'm not stupid, because people will hand in before the game, 2 weeks before the game, they will hand in a sick notice to participate. So the employer of the people here know that they will not be able to work after that. That's how it goes. And we had people we have some guys at the distillery that participates every year. We even had one that won it twice. They either show up after New Year with broken arms, broken ribs, blue eyes, or no teeth, which is absolutely fantastic. So many years ago there was a game for girls as well, but it was only played 1 year, as a lot of the girls lost all their hair during the game. So they decided that never to have girls fight anymore up there, which was good. So that's one of the things Orkney is known for. That's the bar game as well. To the distillery today, one of the reasons Magnus he built his distillery on High Park were most of all, of course, because of the water supply. Karimäki spring, as we used back then, gave a lot of hard water, but clean and pure. Today we're using another spring, but another reason for putting it up that high were that Magnus could keep an eye on the harbor, so he could see when the custom and excise people or the boats from Holland, Belgium, whatever it can be, came in with the gin or Geneva, so he could swap his whiskey for other kind of liquids. So that's one of the reasons he put it in High Park. Today, looking at the distillery, of course we are bigger than when Magnus produced. We reckon that in a good year, Magnus would have been producing around 200 to 300 liters, which were enough at that time for the people that bought it. He had one still. He was still doing the floor malting, his own floor malting and these kind of things. And looking today, we're still doing our own floor malting. We distill 2 times and we put it into cask, a little bit bigger cask than he did. We are producing between 2 and 2.5 million liters of alcohol per year. We do mature on site, which he did, but we mature a little bit longer than he did, because in fact, he didn't mature at all. He put it into casks or even in ceramic or clay bottles and handed it over to the guys that wanted to buy it. But we are maturing on site, and we have all the time between 43 and 46,000 casks lying in our 23 warehouses in Orkney. So, and we have 19 guys employed in production. So should we take a dram now before we're going into production, if people are ready for that?
I've had a couple of drams of the team. I'll be keen on a third.
Good. Starting out with the 10-year-old. The 10-year-old is a whiskey we introduced some years back. Took it off the market, came back a few years again. I think it's about 4 years we took it back again. Predominantly matured in American oak sherry casks. For our core range, we don't use any bourbon casks, but we use sherry casks. About 20 to 25% will be first fill American oak sherry casks, and then the rest will be refill. And the refill cask, we don't talk about the origins of the refill cask, because we might change staves in them. So an American oak certainly could have European oak cask staves and vice versa. But the 10-year-old here is a whiskey that had lots of vanilla. It has some citrus, some tropical fruity flavors coming out. And I bet you all been to whiskey tasting before, so no use on talking to you how to taste whiskey. But one of the things that we always do is simply to take a very, very good look at the color, because the color is very, very important, because it tells us absolutely nothing. But it looks professional to do this, doesn't it? You know, if you go into a bar and you do like this, everyone will say, oh, they know about whiskey. But in fact, most of the whiskeys today on the market will have caramel added to the whiskey. And there's nothing wrong in that. You can't taste it, but when that happens, you can't really tell anything about the color. Most of Scottish distilleries as well are not owned by Scottish people. They're owned by French people, American people, Japanese people, and so on. But Highland Park is owned by Scottish people, and caramel costs money, so we don't use it. Everything you see from Highland Park will always be natural color. And when we know it's natural color, then we can tell a little bit. It can give us a hint of the type of cask that's been used. And this is this has kind of a golden pale color, and that's a good sign of American oak or refill cask. And that's basically what you can tell about the color. By the nose, of course, that's where we get a good kind of idea about the flavors of the whiskey. 32 different things is what you can smell, at least. If you're very good, much more. And on the nose here, there's definitely some sweetness. There's a bit of spiciness, and then there is these creamy vanilla notes coming out on the 10-year here. There's also a wee bit of smoke at the end on the nose. So for me, it's
you can do it.
Half 8 here. So I'm gonna have it. Yeah. Skull, as we say, Solange.
Martin, could I ask you?
Yeah.
I've always been a big fan of the bottle, and
yeah.
These. Could you talk us through this design that's on all of the Highland Park bottles, or all the core range?
Yes.
Anyway?
Yeah. It's the design here is something we got inspired by a church in Norway, and very, very old stave church in a small place called Ornes. And Ornes is the place of the oldest stave church made by the Vikings in Norway. It's a UNESCO area, so it's something that's really, really protected. They have on the wall outside a huge wooden carving that tells the story about good and evil. And on the carving, when you go close, you can see that it's. See if I have a box. It's a little bit better to see.
This one?
Yep. Yes. Yes. There you can see what looks like a greyhound dog actually is a lion, but the Vikings never made it to Africa to meet the lions, but they heard the tales about how brave they were. So that's the story between the lion and the serpent, the snake, where the snake is the evil and the lion is the good, and that's the fight between them we got inspired by. And Andy Bowman, which our designer, he went up there together with myself and my boss Jason Craig, and we spent a few days near the church and got permission to take a lot of pictures and do the drawings of that, and became the design of our bottle and our packaging. On every bottle there's a heart on the back as well, which will now today be used as the name for our newest edition, our 15-year-old. So you can see the heart on top there as well. So, but inspired by a Norwegian Viking stave church in a very small remote place called Ornes. And to tell a little bit about our heritage and Orkney's previous owners, which was Norway and Denmark. So, but I think they look beautiful. So enjoy the bottles. They are really, really nice, and I will show you the new 15 a little bit later, so you can see that. So the 10-year-old, as I said, American oak in the palate as well. we have citrus, we have vanilla, and the DNA that that Highland Park is known for is this heather honey smoke that comes out towards the end, and that's definitely in here. And with the 10-year-old, we definitely find a lot of the distillery character, because this is before cask really takes over the flavor of the spirit. So a huge fan myself of the 10-year-old, and one I always use when I go out, explaining what Highland Park is all about, so we can see that journey up to 30 or 40 when I'm allowed to do those tastings. So that was the 10-year-old, and I'm now moving into kind of production, unless there's more questions or anything you want to touch upon, Ash.
Just, if you could, and I think you're going to do that now anyway, just explain to the boys and girls how the smoky character ends up in.
Yes. I'm going to go through that right now, because Highland Park is a very traditional distillery. The way we produce whiskey is a little bit different than most other distilleries. There are a few distilleries right now, the counting as those are that in production right now is 6 distilleries still to do the old style of floor malting. And the floor malting is how we traditionally produced whiskey. And if you have in front of you kind of a scheme about whiskey production, most distillers will start with where they do the mashing, where they will get some malted barley in, they will crush it, and they will mill, and then they will mash it. We go a little bit further back, and we use a barley type today called Lauret, and Lauret will be put into water for 2.5 days, where it soaks in water. The germination starts, and after 2.5 days, we will drain it for water. We will lay it out on a huge concrete floor for the next 5 to 7 days to germinate. And some of you might have seen pictures about guys walking around throwing the barley up in the air, and that's actually how it's still done. It was also the very first job I had at Highland Park when I started, and when I began my career in the industry, I came to Highland Park 21 years ago to learn a lot about the process of floor malting. And I was told before I left that the manager at Highland Park at that time, a man called Russell Anderson, had absolutely no humor at all. They called him the driest man in Scotland because there was never a laugh on him, and he never told a joke. And I came up and I met Russell outside the gate of Highland Park, and he was there to welcome me. Came over, he shook my hand, and the only thing he said was, "Welcome, son." But the way he called me son, I got scared. Something was going to happen. So we came in and he said, "You have to do the floor malting for the next 7 days. It'll be very, very hard for you. So you have to drink a lot. If you don't drink a lot, you will be sore in your arms and back tomorrow." And I had a picture in my head of a huge bottle of water. He had a 12-year-old Highland Park in his hand and said, "If you drink this, the next 8 hours, you will not be sore in your arms and back tomorrow." And stupid enough as I was, I believed him. So went in to do the floor malting, and over the next 8 hours, I emptied a bottle of 12-year-old Highland Park. And I still today have no idea how I made it back to my room. I know I slept well. And then I came back next morning, and Russell was at his office, and I went in to sign in. And he said, "How are you doing, son?" And I explained that he was absolutely right. I had no sore arms. I had no sore back, but my head was extremely sore. And he smiled and he looked at me and he said, "You know, son, there's only one cure for that. And he gave me another bottle of 12-year-old Highland Park and said, go back to work. So, and that's how we went on for 7 days. And it's just one of the, you know, every time I come up, the guys are still talking about it, which was quite funny, to be honest. I was looking in the mirror and back mirror here, it was quite funny. So after the 7 days, we will end up with something that is now fully germinated, in the sense we like it, because it's if we leave it on the floor, it will just become a straw, as in the nature. So we have to stop at the right moment, and the right moment is actually when you break it into two. You can write on the wall with it. That's where you have the malt coming out. So we have right now what we call green malt, and we need to stop the germination, and we do that by moving it from this huge concrete floor to a metal floor with lots of holes in it. And underneath we have a kiln, an oven, and this is where we fire up with this. And this is peat. This is Orkney peat. And I can see some of you are looking very close to it. I promise you, it is peat. It's not something else. And I honestly had a trip to Japan about 6 years ago, and I brought peat because I was going to the Whisky Live in Tokyo, and I was stopped with custom and excise and had to explain what this was. And the Japanese custom and excise people are not that good in English, so I said, well, this is peat, and the only kind of thing they could relate to regarding peat was a man's name. So they were, you know, the eyes I got from these guys thought that I was traveling around with my best friend here, Peat, were unbelievable, until I had to, and thank God for mobile phones and so on, so I could show them what peat actually was and explain them about whiskey. And the minute I told them the word whiskey, they completely changed and let me go. So then they were happy. But the peat here, when we talk about peat in Scotland, peat is very, very different around Scotland. And one of the reasons that our smoky whiskies in Scotland are so different as well. There are 4 peat bogs or peat hills in Scotland. Some of you, of course, know, and I can see behind you, Ash, you have Lagavulin as well. So Isla is one of the places where we use a lot of peat for the distilleries there. 8-9 distilleries are using peat from Isla. The peat from Isla, you have to imagine that thousands of years ago, we're talking 30, 40,000 years ago, Isla was underwater, came up to the surface, trees start growing, and until 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, Isla was actually covered with trees, and the trees died and decomposed for thousands of years. It became the peat they are cutting right now in Isla. So a very good mix between a lot of trees and seaweed. Give us, when you taste Isla whiskies like Lafroig, Lagavulin, Bowmore, Ardbeg, all these beautiful whiskies there, but it gives us kind of an iodine medicinal flavor, and that's the peat from Isla that gives that. Going up through the Highlands, we come to St. Fergus, which is in Aberdeenshire, and St. Fergus peat is very similar to Isla peat, but it doesn't have the seaweediness. So it gives us still very smoky flavor, not as iodine, but still a little bit medicinal. The same does the peat from Tumintal, which is again used by, like St. Fergus, used by all the maltings, the big maltings around Scotland. And the maltings around Scotland, especially in the area where St. Fergus and Tumintal is, will make malt for approximately 30 to 35 distilleries in that area. Now you move up towards the Orkney Islands, you see that the scenery, the landscape is really, really changing. Coming up to, you pass Glenmorangie, as you talked about, as you go up, you pass Klein-Leesbroer, Old Pulteney, and eventually you come to the ferry that will take you up to Orkney Islands. And for the last 10, 12 kilometers, there's no trees. And it's one of the things you won't see when you enter Orkney as well. That is that there will be no trees at all. Trees can't live in Orkney due to the wind. So all these trees, well, they never live there. So when you cut peat like this in Orkney, all these small roots you see here, which is quite hairy, is actually just heather. So 95% of what peat in Orkney contains is actually heather. That gives us these sweet floral flavor that Highland Park is known for. And that is all due to the peat. So back to production. We have to dry our green malt, and we fire up with the peat. The peat will start creating smoke that will go up through this metal floor and enter the green malt, going straight in and sit where we have the starch, and now called malt, of course. This will give us the smoky flavor you have in Highland Park. The peat contains 3 layers, and these 3 layers is very, very different. So on top we have what we call fog, F-O-G-G, which is kind of the fresh heather, fresh peat with the fresh heather, which is approximately 500 to 1,000 years old. Cutting down, we go down to the mid of the peat, which is about 1 meter and 50 centimeters down, 1.5 meter. This is what we call Jarthy. And Jarthy is where we have peat that's about 1,500 to 2,000 years old. This is where most of the flavors actually sits. Cutting further down to about 2-3 meters, we're now coming down to what we call moss. And moss is the oldest part, 3,000 to 4,000 years old. But we have to use a bit of each layer to get the smoke right. If the peat is wrong, our whiskey will be wrong. So very important that we're using Orkney peat. Very important that the peat is always cut right and used in the right proportions. We cut the peat by hand. We used to have a tractor with a machine that could cut it for us, but 3 years in a row we used more man hours digging out the tractor than cutting peat. So we went back to hand cut peat again, which were much more sensible to do that. So when we dry it, we will use the first about 12 to 15 hours, using the peat fire to give it the smoke. The smoke has to go through the barley corn when it's wet. As it gets dry, nothing can really penetrate it. After that, we use coke or coal to dry it completely, and we crush it to something called grist. And we will, and grist looks a little bit. This is grist, and again, I simply can't advise anyone working in the whiskey industry to travel with this. It is, again, very, very hard to explain custom excise people that this is actually just grist used for whiskey production. So if any one of you will be brand ambassadors traveling around the world, don't travel with this. Don't travel with peat. It gives you lots of problems. But this is grist, and this is what we actually now soak into water. So the next process is the mashing. And here we add water 3 times. We're starting out with water that's about 67 degrees Celsius. This will now be soaked into the grist. The sugary water that comes out is something we call wort, and wort is very, very high in the sugar content and what we need to the further production. We now go on to the next process of water, which will now be in the mid 80s degrees Celsius, and ending with the third water, which is about 92 to 95 degrees Celsius. The water that comes out of the third water is so low in sugar, we're down to about 1%, but we cool that down and use as the first water in the next mashing. So the water we're using, about the 67 to 70 degrees, the first water, already contained 1% of sugar. Now we take the wort and we put it into one of our 12 washbacks, all made of Oregon pine, so wooden washbacks. We put our pressed yeast down here. We're using a yeast called Carry M and Carry MX. The yeast will now start eating the sugar in the water, and after 52 to 60 hours, it will be turned into a beer. Basically, wash beer at 8.5% alcohol. And I'm not sure how many of you, I'm sure you all tasted beer, but that's not something compared to a wash beer. A wash beer is 8.5% strong and 33 degrees warm. And when I started at Highland Park, Russell Anderson told me after, I think it was 5 days, that if I wanted to be part of the Highland Park family, I needed to drink a beer in one go. And as they're Scottish owned, they live in Orkney, there's no reason to go out and buy a beer when they make their own. So we went into a 12 washbacks. Russell poured me a pint of our wash. And remember, 8.5% alcohol, 33 degrees warm. And he said, if you want to be part of our family, you need to drink this in one go. Everyone working at the distillery were there to welcome me, I thought. So he put me this pint, took it and put it to my mouth, emptied it in one go, and very, very proud, I put the glass down, empty. And I was kind of waiting for an applause by all the people working there. But the only thing they did was this. They were looking at their clock. And I looked at Russell and said, what's going on? And he smiled and he said, just wait. And I waited a few more minutes, and he kind of poked me and said, son, I forgot to tell you, the yeast was still alive. And I looked at him and said, what does that actually mean? And he said, well, just wait. And after a few more minutes, I could feel it. I could hear it. And then I ran to the nearest toilet. And I can tell you, if Usain Bolt had been there, he would have been jealous of my speed. I was sitting there for a couple of hours, went back to Russell at his office. And again, Russell's very famous words, how are you doing, son, came out. And I said, I've been better. I think I lost about 6 pounds sitting at the toilet. And he laughed and he said, I won 25 pounds because I had 8 minutes right. The time it took from I emptied the beer till I ran. That's the fun we have in Orkney. Nothing much is going on, but that's the fun we have. So a very good advice, if you ever come to a distillery and they ask you to taste the wash beer, have a wee go, just a wee sip. Don't taste or drink a pint because you will regret it. Yeah, it's not the best beer in the world, to be honest. Should we taste the 12-year-old before we go on?
Yeah. We just tackle that question. Someone asked a little while ago, if you know, if in the old times, how much Magnus might have been charging for a bottle of whiskey.
No, it can't have been much, to be honest. We we know that looking at some of the taxation that were back then, first of all, most of the islands were free of tax. So the tax that Magnus paid were kind of one time only. But we have in some of the old books, it said something about 5 pence and 2 shillings, which today would probably have been in the area of 5-7 pounds. But again, they didn't really have any measurements. You know, you bought it either by these small casks, which would probably been around 10 to 20 liters, and the bottles that Magnus filled were the bottles that came in from the household. So that could have been everything from 100 cl to 2 liters. But some of the numbers we have is these 5 pence and 2 shillings for a bottle, and how the size of the bottle back then would probably been around 50 cl or something like that. So, so that's kind of the numbers that goes on all the time, 5 pence and 2 shillings. And of course, back in 1798, it could have been a fortune. Not sure about the rate back then, but we reckon it would be around these 5-7 pounds today.
Martin, I had another question. I obviously I told you I haven't been to Orkney, but I did go to Lefroy and Beaumont, and they had those big towers where they do the, you know, peat. They use the peat fire and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously, in times we've heard some of the bigger distilleries, you know, Lefroy in particular, they said that's not all the malted barley that's in use. So when we have commercial maltings, are they doing the peating or using the peat in the same way on a larger scale, or is it happening in drums? And
yes and no. Where if you go to Orkney, we're malting about 20 to 25% of our own barley ourselves, and the rest will come from a malting. As you said, we're using for 7.5 ton mold, we're using 1.5 to 2 ton peat. And that's the ratio when you do it through the pagoda, as you see in Scotland, these beautiful roofs. Going into a malting, they will use peat, definitely use peat, and they will use a lot of it. But it also, it's a closed cabin now and again. If you go to Port Ellen maltings, that's huge drum rolls they use, which is closed, so the smoke can go in there, and they're not using the same amount of peat as you would do when you use a pagoda. The thing with maltings, and probably taking a little bit away from Highland Pong, but that's what we find being very romantic, is that if you do your malting at a maltings and the peat smoke, you will get the exact same ppm value every time. That means if you're looking for 38 ppm, that's what you get from a malting, because they're very, very accurate. Our ppm value, the way we do it, is everything between 38 and 48. So it will kind of jump up and down, but at the end of the day, it's all about the cask we're using, that Gordon is putting together. So we don't really put a lot of effort into to that, and we are mixing it with the unpeated malt. But the process in general are the same. It's just the equipment that will be different. So most of the maltings will also use peat fire that will be pressed through a kind of a huge windblower, a ventilator fan that actually blows it in and kind of press it in. So there's some different ways to do it, but the effect will be the same at the end. And for maltings, much more accurate and much more consistent than what we do. But we like the fact that we are very traditional, and that we do have these ups and downs. And we actually, about 20 years ago, we we tried to have everything malted at Bergsmold in Inverness. So we stopped our own production for a while. They were using peat from St. Fergus, which changed the flavor in our new make spirit. So we actually transported peat from Orkney down to Bergsmold in Inverness. Quite expensive, but again, it was the same process but different equipment they used, Saladin boxes and these kind of things. So changed the flavors in our new make spirit dramatically, and we had to go back and do it again, mostly because of a peat that is in Orkney, which will change under different humidities, different processes, and these kind of things. So we are confident, and all the tests we have done recently together with Marie Stanton, our distiller manager, we have to do the floor malting if we want to continue having the same flavor in Highland Park. So yeah. So
thank you for explaining that.
So the process is more or less the same, but the equipment is very different.
Yeah. Now, because at Lefroy, they had I questioned them, but they gave me a more corporate answer.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful you explained it.
Yeah, no, it's one of these things, you know, that we still learn every day. If you look at our peat fire, going back not so long, about 6 years, we used twice as much as peat. We used peating hours that was about 20 to 25 hours, so double the time. And we got these 38, 45 ppm. Marie Stanton, which in all the best meaning by the word, is a huge nerd when it comes to whiskey production. And thank God she is our manager, because she looks into new possibilities. And she was looking at the peat fire, which we have done for more than 200 years. And she said, why not turning down the heat a little bit? Let's try that. And we used the same amount of peat, but only for 10 to 12 hours. And there was no flames. You just see, you just saw it glimmering, the lights and so on. And the first kind of batches we did, we got 90 ppm. So twice as much as we normally did. So she said, let's turn down the time a little bit, see what happens, but keep an eye on the smoke all the time. We don't need fire. And the next, couple of batches we did with up to 12, 15 hours of peat fire, we got 45 ppm. And it didn't change the flavors in a new make. It was still the same, so there's no reason we have to go up and use much more peat or much more time to it when we can do it differently. So it's also about looking at new opportunities, and as I said before, we learn every day, and it was definitely a learning process. Instead of 20 to 25 hours, and instead of using 3 tons of peat, you can now use 1.5, and we could go down in half and still get the same ppm just by controlling the heat a little bit. And that's basically the same the big maltings will do, depending on what ppm value you will have. They will change the amount of peat and the timing as well. So yeah.
Would they, when they use the ppm value, would the same barley end up in 2 different distilleries, or they will always do a specific barley to a specific ppm for you?
Yeah, but if you look at Port Ellen maltings at in Isla, they're malting for all the Isla whiskies, and Diageo is owning Port Ellen maltings. They also own Lagavulin and Caol Ila, and the ppm value here is the same barley, it's the same peat, and the ppm value is the same for Lagavulin and Caol Ila, but it still turns out to be 2 very, very different whiskies. And that's coming down to, of course, the stills and everything else they're using there. But then you have, of course, Ardbeg, and Ardbeg will go up to 52, 54 ppm. So that's where they turn up for the peat fire, of course, and for Port Ellen to create that ppm for Ardbeg. It's a little bit different when you go to Bruichladdich and you look at Port Charlotte and you look at Octomore, which will take it up to 120, even 300 ppm as they use, which you know, you have to understand, I used to work at Bruichladdich and I love Bruichladdich, and there's nothing bad to say about neither Port Charlotte or Octomore. It's only that your palate and your nose can't detect more than approximately 50 to 60 ppm. That's basically it. So taking it up to 120 or 300 is, I think it's fantastic that they can do it, but you can't really taste the difference. It's just really smoky, just like Ardbeg, and so on. So there's no reason to do it. And I think in the past, at least, they were not using Port Ellen because Port Ellen wouldn't go that far up, but Baird's Malt in Inverness took it up to I think 150 to 300. So that's not all Isla Peat for Bruichladdich and Octomore, and that will of course have a different kind of flavors to it and so on. So, but as I explained earlier, it will still have some medicinal flavors because the peat will come from St. Ferguson to Mental, which basically looks a lot like Isla Peat. So,
should we have a dram of the 12-year-old?
Yes, let's go to the 12-year-old. And compared to the 10-year-old, where I talked a lot about American oak sherry cask, we're now on the European oak sherry cask. The amount of first fill cask is almost the same, 20 to 25%, going up and down a little bit to get the right flavors. But this one here we launched in 1978. That was the first whiskey we launched as a part of a core range, which would be consistent. We did have some whiskies out there before this one here, but they were not consistent, and it was more made for you know, when different bottling or grocery shops asked us, we would do something for them. But this is the first one we made, which should be quite consistent. It has a very distinct, beautiful sweetness to it. And it also have some dry fruit, more on the lighter side, kind of orange peel and these kinds. We're not going over to dry grapes and so on yet, but it's definitely still there. It's a whiskey which for a 12-year-old have a really nice, beautiful sweetness and quite long. So let's try it. And again, natural color.
That's becoming quite important to the educated whiskey drinker. You know, the natural color, and then obviously chill filtration on certain drams. Yeah. As more education, I guess, through YouTube and through the whiskey shows is getting out there.
Yeah. No, but it's I think it's you know, the natural color comes down to a lot of things, and the natural color for our 12-year-old and which has been there as natural color all the time is something that we always believed in. If your cask is good enough from the beginning, there's no reason to add any caramel to it. And by that, I'm not saying that everyone that do caramel, that their cask is not good enough. I just think, you know, if you have cask that will give a really good color, we don't add. And as we only use sherry casks in our core range, we do get a lot of color. It's more for distilleries that will use 100% bourbon cask or refill cask. They might need to add something to just to give it a slight note of it. But again, it's something you can't taste. But for those who don't know what caramel looks like, this is bitter caramel. And I quite often hear when I'm out doing tastings that when they taste the 12-year-old or the 18, they say, "Oh, we can taste caramel." I say, "Well, that's fantastic, but it's not spirited caramel you can taste. It's actually caramel that comes from the casks, the notey flavor there, because they always explain it as being sweet, and I can bet you spirit caramel is some of the most, the most bitter things I've ever tasted. It's really, really bitter. So if you use a lot in a blended whiskey, it will turn out to be quite bitter, to be honest. So it's not something we use. But back to the 12, I think the 12 is a fantastic entry for Highland Park as well, just as the 10, two very different whiskies. And some, a whiskey that I sit and enjoy, very, very often when I'm watching a good football game or whatever it can be, a rugby game or whatever, because it actually completes me with the notes and whiskey I really want to have. Again, the DNA of Highland Park is there with all these beautiful heathery notes coming out, and a touch of smoke at the end. And as you can see, it's not only 10 and 12, we also call it Viking scars and Viking honor, and that's of course to celebrate and honor the heritage we have.
Martin, it was actually, I'm very thankful you explained the difference in the type of peat, because when you make that note about the headeriness, because there's no trees here, and now we understand why it's coming through on the palate.
Yeah, it's and you can see, the smokiness is quite gentle, and of course we're taking it down because we are doing we do mix it with unpeated, but I've tasted the 90 ppm we have in Orkney, which were put into cask on its own, so we do have some heavily peated malt, but again, it's not even close or near the flavors of Isla whiskies, because our peat do not allow it. It doesn't have the same ingredients as you will find in Isla whiskies, for instance. So we can make the same results more or less as you will have for Port Charlotte or Octomore, but the ppm value do not tell about the flavor. It's simply just a technical measurement to tell about the ppm value. So whether you have two whiskeys side by side with 45 ppm, the smokiness can be completely different. So it's just a measurement to tell how peaty it is technically, but not taste wise. So
definitely tasty.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So
luckily the price point allows it to be sessionable.
Yeah, I think it's one lots of people go back to all the time, which I of course very, very proud about. We now had the wash. We talked a little bit about the wash beer, not really enjoyable. We distill it, and we have two pairs of stills at Highland Park. Our wash stills will take it up to about approximately 25%. Our spirit still, which is a little bit smaller, 9,000 liters, will take it up to approximately 69.8% ABV. We will then put it into our casks. And Highland Park is owned by a company called Edrington Group. And Edrington Group do own a few other distilleries. We own Glenrothes as well. And then some of you might have heard about our micro distillery, very, very small underground, called Macallan, very tiny distillery.
The Gucci bag of whiskey industry.
Yeah, well, it's the biggest distillery in Scotland at the moment, and huge, producing wonderful whiskies as well. But the cask we are using is the same cask management as we used for Highland Park and for Macallan and so on. And most of the cask we use will be made out of European oak. So the process here is quite different from a lot of other distilleries. We do have a man taking care of this, a man called Stuart Markvardsen, Stuart used to be a cooper. He worked at a cooperage in Glasgow, a cooperage we own. He became director for that as well, and we wanted him to know much more about oak, and not just building casks, but about oak. So we trained him. We sent him down to Jerez de la Frontera in south part of Spain to make everything that we wanted to have contact between sherry bodegas, the government, the guys in the forest that works with cutting down the trees and all these kind of things. When Stuart went down to Jerez de la Frontera, there was one thing we forgot to do. We forgot to give him a title. And if you look at the whiskey industry, it's very, very important to have a title, because now and again, we do drink a little bit more than we should of our own products, and we will forget what we're doing. And that's why a title and a business card is very, very helpful to know what we are doing. So when I'm out and people are asking me what I'm doing after a few drams, my business card tells me I'm a senior brand ambassador. Just reminds me that I'm still old and I still drink whiskey, which is good. But we never gave Stuart a title, and it was so funny when I came to Jerez the first time to work with Stuart. He handed over his homemade business card and the title he gave himself, which was Stuart Markvardsen, Master of Wood. And I think that's such a great title to give yourself, Master of Wood. It was amazing. I worked at the cooperage for 2 weeks building casks, and after the first night, you can imagine that this is in south part of Sweden, south part of Spain. Going into Spain in August by itself is very, very hot. End of August, even warmer and hotter in south part of Spain. And I was working at the cooperage with all these open fires and so on. And after a few hours, Stuart came in and he looked at me, and I was soaking in sweat. I was simply just warm. And he said, well, let's go out for a pint. Let's go out for some whiskey, some beer, and some sherry. And we did. And at the end of the night, I became a little bit drunk, I must admit. It's not very often it happens, but I did. And some guys from another distillery came over and wanted to say hi. Some guys I knew from Scotland. And I had to introduce Stuart Markvardsen for them. And the worst thing that could happen happened. I forgot his title. So when they came over and said, let me introduce you to Stuart Markvardsen, Lord of the Rings. And that was the only title I could think about. That was Lord of the Rings. And after that, Stuart never really talked to me again, as he thought I meant he was a hobbit. I excused to him many, many times, and he was actually keeper this weekend where I became a master, and had to excuse him again. And he laughed a little bit about it now, so we are good. But Stuart takes care of everything when it comes to our casks. So basically, this is what happens when we cut down the trees in the north part of Spain. We cut them down as these huge, massive oak trees. And the logs of trees will be air dried in north part of Spain for approximately 6 months before we take it into our cooperage and take it out to staves like this. This is a cask stave. And we will air dry the staves for another 2 to 4 years, both in north part of Spain, but also in Jerez de la Frontera. So the air drying process could easily be 4 years. Why do we air dry it, and why do we not put it into an oven? Well, if you put oak into an oven, it might leak, it might crush a little bit. but also taste-wise, we are taking things away from it, and we leave things that we don't want. So if you air dry, as we do the staves, you will get rid of the tannin, which is most common in European oak. The tannin will be washed away by rain and these kind of things, by the humidity that you'll find in Spain. But we will keep the sweetness. If you oven dry, it's actually the other way around. You will first of all get rid of the sweetness, but you will tie up with the heat in the oven. You will tie up the tannin. So that's the difference between what some wine producer will do compared to the whiskey industry. We will air dry it simply because of the flavors, but also for the wood itself at the end of the day. Now, after the air drying process, it will go into our cooperage in Spain, Terrassa Cooperage, where they will build the casks. And to give you an idea about how they work, I worked with a guy down there for the 2 weeks called Pedro. Pedro was my mentor when it came to making cask. And Pedro is fantastic. He builds 4 to 5 casks per day of 500 liters. A very, very hard job to do. When a cask is done, you will put a few liters of water inside the cask, and then you will put compressed air into it. You will seal it and then compressed air. And if water comes out, Pedro would not get paid for the cask. The 2 weeks I worked with Pedro, I never saw a drop of water coming out of his cask. Absolutely handcraft what he's doing. I built 1 cask in 2 weeks. Not really good at being a cooper. And after it was done, I put a few liters of water inside. I put compressed air. And I can honestly say it was the most beautiful sight I've ever seen, as water was coming out everywhere. A garden center would have been so happy for my cask as a sprinkler. So I'm not a good cooper, but these guys down there are simply amazing, building cask after our specifications and making them right every time. So the next process is that we will now hand it over to the sherry bodegas. And the sherry bodegas will produce dry oloroso sherry for our cask. The sherry will be into our cask for approximately 18 to 24 months. And we'll season our cask, getting it ready for us. We will then ship it up empty to Orkney, and we will put it into our warehouse. And before I'm going to tell about warehousing, let's go to the 18. Because the 18, as you see here, is our most award-winning whiskey. Absolutely a stunning product. And again, it's European oak we're using here. 45 to 50% first fill European oak will be used here with dry oloroso sherry. This gives us a bit more nutty flavor. It gives us some hint of marzipan, but it also gives us much more of the dry fruit. It's the raisins, it's Scottish Christmas cake. It's a little bit of the orange peel as well, but it's really, really complex. It's really, really balanced, and it's one of these whiskeys where you can actually sit and nose this the whole night. There's so many great things coming out, and just a wonderful, wonderful nose to it. Taste-wise, again, it really, really follows the nose quite well. A little bit more sweetness to it on the palate. There will be some more marzipan-y notes coming out. There will be a little bit more nutty flavors as well. But most important is that it will now, after you have all this dry fruit and so on, it will now change into to become a little bit more floral. It will come into be this heather honey notes we will find, and the finish is simply just incredible. Long with just a slightly hint of spice, but sweet and honey, and at the end, the smoke will come in the back of your tongue, moving on the side of your tongue as well. And that's where I call the hallelujah moment. It's where the smoke kind of returns to your side of your mouth, bringing me a little bit back to our founder, Magnus Jönsson. Not sure he made 18, but just that hallelujah moment, saying, "Oh, there it is again," which is simply incredible for our 18-year-old. So I'm very, very proud to work with a whiskey like that as well.
Very very satisfying on the palate compared to any number of other space out 18-year-old. It just lingers for a long time. It's the smoke, obviously.
Yeah. It does. It's and the thing is that you have new flavors coming out every time you take a sip. There's new things. It's very, very balanced. It's very complex as well at the same time. But I simply just think that it's an amazing whiskey. So. Yeah.
Could you just touch on for Dave? So like the one I've got here says February 2017 batch, and then it's got a rotation number. And I know the 25 and the 30, they come in batches as well. Could you just touch on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, well, we changed it to batch numbers recently, and basically we did that because no matter how good a master blender we have, there will always be small differences in the batches. For the 18, we might stop it because we attack the process a little bit different now, where Gordon, our master blender, will have 4 or 5 different batches, and he will take a little bit of each batch to make it consistent. So not so much on the 18 anymore. We do the batches, but when we talk about the old ones, 21, 20, 25, if you look at the cask numbers we're using there as well, or the number of casks, it will be different. It will be different type of cask, and it's the same with our cask strength. I'm not sure you'll have that in New Zealand yet, but the cask strength. Do you have them?
No, not yet.
No. But the cask strength again will be different batches, and
Dave was just holding his bottle up. He imported one from UK.
Ah, okay. Well, yeah. Dave, I don't know if you have batch 1 or batch 2 of the release 2, 1 or 2.
Batch 1.
1, yeah. And just to take release 1 compared to release 2, a huge difference. But we are very transparent in what we're doing and why it's different and why we do it. So it's basically to give people the chance to see what we can. But there will still be, when we're making the 21, whether we're doing 15 casks or we do 100 casks, there will still be the same DNA in that whiskey. But we explain why we are making it different to give more pineapple notes, whatever it can be, and the same with the 20, with the 25. Talking about the cask string as Dave has, it's there's no 2 batches there that will be 100% the same, and that is simply to give the people the chance to taste different batches of cask string at different strength as well. So the first one, as Dave has, is 63.3. The batch we have out right now, batch 2, is 63.9. So we are in that area very strong, and where people can add the water to it as they want. And it's part of our core range as well that will be out there, and maybe in the future in New Zealand as well. So the batches we're making is simply to give people a chance to taste different things, and we are, due to that, we need to be a little bit transparent. The 18 will always be the same. Can we say the same vatting of whiskey and the percentage of first fill and refill casks. But as no two casks will be the same, and I'll get back to that a little bit later, will be different. It's something we have to look into about if we want to do it in batches, and especially because it is different batches we put together. So yeah.
This one is not a question, but I think it's more a statement from Julie in the South Island around how HP Highland Park 12 has always been a bit of a guilty pleasure for her, but she's often surrounded by whiskey geeks who judge whiskies below 46 and the big non-chill filter statements and all that. And she's enjoying HP 12 tonight amongst some other indie bottlings at 46%. So yeah. Thanks for the comment, Julie.
Good. Happy to hear you enjoy it, at least. So yeah.
Yeah. And Pals is asking, he's curious if Highland Park is doing something to become greener, like Glenfiddich uses ethanol to run their trucks. Do you run your ferry on ethanol, maybe, or something like that?
Can you repeat that question, because you just
sorry, he's asking if Highland Park is doing something to become greener, more greener, yeah, because Glenfiddich is running their trucks on ethanol now. They did the big marketing and media thing on it a couple of months back.
Yeah, well, we are trying to change a lot of things, and one of the things that we try to make a little bit different is, of course, as I mentioned before, the peat, making that a little bit different. We're looking at our packaging right now to change that, so that will be a little bit more of the sustainability issues we're working with. We are looking at the fuel we're using at our distillery right now, that within the next 5 years we will change that to be much greener. So we are part of a huge process now, making it more into environmental friendly and these kind of things as well. We do, of course, have a slight problem being a distillery producing on an island far away, as we need to transport it down to Glasgow. We can't do the bottling on site. We can't do, and whether we did, we still need to transport it. So there's a lot of going back and forward between Glasgow and Orkney in big lorries and with ferries and these kind of things. But we do our best. We try to make numbers, better all the time. And we do have a committee in Orkney looking at that all the time, not only from the distillery, but experts and so on. And funny enough, in Orkney we do have a science festival every year, and one of the issues, or I wouldn't call it an issue, but one of the topics every year is experts coming in from all over the world at the science festival, where Highland Park is the topic, about what we can do to make things better and greener. So it is something we're looking into, and it's definitely something we are working on all the time. What we can change, the amount of oils coming into our production, everything from water we're using to peat to casks, all these kind of things. We're looking into everything at the moment, and numbers are getting better. We can definitely see that we get the numbers from the Scots government about the peat, about everything we do, what we let out as well of the water we've been using, and so all the numbers are getting better. And our aim is that we should be down where the government want us to be, which is not always good, but in 5 years' time. So we are working very, very hard on that. But again, we can't skip the peat completely, because then we will change the flavors. But we can find different ways, as Marie looked into, to change the amount of peat. Going back 50 years, they were not thinking about the amount of peat. They just cut it and then they throw it into the kiln, and that's how it was. But today, of course, we're looking into how can we use less, and how can we keep the sustainability of our peat hill better. As it looks now, our peat will only grow with 1 millimeter per year. That means if we cut down 3 meters, it will take 3,000 years until we can cut peat there again. But as peat comes from moss and from lots of water soaked into to the area for years, we are actually making, and we've done that for the last 12 years. We are making water holes out there so the water can go out, and the growing of the peat will actually go a little bit faster the natural way. And it's not that we are missing water in Orkney, but it seems to run down to the hill and down to small water holes and springs and so on all the time. So we are trying to build fences that could keep the water where we cut the peat, so that will actually regain quicker. So we are in the process, yeah, definitely.
Could we just quickly talk about the Viking Legends series?
Yeah.
And HP 15 after, and then we'll open it up for the ladies and gentlemen. Should we do the Viking Legends first?
Yes. Yeah, the Viking Legends was quite a process, and quite an interesting thing we did with Valkyrie, Valknut, and Valfather. We to be honest, we had nowhere to go with the whiskies to start out with, but we decided to give it a go. And first of all, we needed to have a designer to design the whiskies for us, or not the whiskey, the packaging for us, and that became a Danish Viking, which I've known for years, that made the design of the bottles and the design of our packaging. And we were looking into the liquid as well, and the liquid is very, very different in them, but we needed to have kind of a go for it as a red thread. So there was a link to all of them. And starting out with Valkyrie, we wanted to introduce the spirits of the Vikings, the angels, the Valkyries. And for the whiskey there, we used 3 different kind of casks. We used American oak sherry, we used bourbon, we used European oak sherry, and we used a proportion of a heavily peated malt, some whiskey we made as well. So Valkyrie is a little bit stronger than you'll normally see. 45.9, if I remember correctly, was the alcohol strength, and it's a whiskey with lots of fruitiness, a little bit more smoke, and a really, really nice hint of spice to it. When it came to Valknut, we did again some different things here. We were only using American oak sherry, American oak bourbon, a little higher percentage of the heavily peated malt went into that, 46.8% alcohol. But we also used, for the first time ever, we were using our local barley. We were using something called tartan, which is the only barley type that can grow in Orkney and used for beer or whiskey production. So we use that for Valknut, which gives us a very spicy, peppery whiskey as well, and but with some beautiful notes at the end. The spice continued all through the end, made the finish extremely long. And then we had Valfather, and Valfather is the same as Odin. So we needed that to have a little bit more of everything. It was 47 ABV. It was 100% refill cask, and the reason we used 100% refill cask was simply to allow much of the flavors to come out and was not hidden behind some sherry notes. It was also the most peated whiskey we have made until today. So until today. So it's quite peaty and smoky. But again, for those of you that tasted it, it's not near an Isla whiskey. It's a typical Orkney mold, but just with a little bit more peat to it. And that's the Viking Legends. Is the whole idea about it. There's no age statement in any of them, but the whole idea was simply just to build a story about the brave Vikings went into battle, and they were chosen by the Valkyries. They got the Valkyrie tattoo, and they came up to the Old Father, the Allfather there. And as they came closer to Valhalla, the smoke increased the higher they got up towards Valhalla, and that was kind of the point of the whole thing. So-called designer whiskies, which we made for special occasions, and that was the whole idea behind it. Yeah.
Is this a one-off release, Martin?
Sorry.
Is that one-off release, like a limited number of stocks?
Yeah. It was a special or limited editions we made, and when they were gone, they were gone. It was a one-off we made. We're taking a break from special releases for a while, and concentrate a little bit more on our core range, like with the cask string, the 15, making the 18 better, making the 12 better, and try to make it much more consistent. And it works really well. We have the stock we have right now at Highland Park is simply amazing. So yeah.
Very interesting. Just one question before we go to Highland Park 15. So this one says February 27 batch. So does that means it's been taken out of the casks in 2017 at some point?
Yeah, it means that we made the vatting of that in 2017.
So that means that this is 1990 stock I'm drinking right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that's put into to the vatting. That's where Gordon pick out the casks and make the vatting for that. So yeah. But before we go to the 15, just a few more things about just so you know, have a slight idea about maturation in Orkney, because that's a little bit different. We talked about the cask. The cask were coming up to Orkney. And we matured, of course, in Orkney at our warehouses up there, the 23 warehouses. But just to give you an idea about the climate in Orkney and how different it is. As I told you, we're in between North Sea and Atlantic Ocean. We have the wind from both of these seas coming in, and it's quite hard, to be honest. But we also have the Gulf Stream coming up, ending its day north of Orkney, which means that our summers are actually pretty cool, and our winters pretty mild. And if you compare our temperatures to Macallan, which is just 100 miles south in Speyside, summers at Macallan can be 27 to 30 degrees Celsius. Winters at Macallan can be down to minus 15 degrees Celsius. So a huge gap between winter and summer, which also means when you have that big gap, a cask will move like this in the warehouse. And that's where we have the Angel's share, which is approximately 2% per year in Scotland. Going up to Orkney, Summers at Orkney will be around 12 degrees Celsius, so not really warm. Winters will be approximately 2 degrees Celsius, so not a huge gap between summer and winter. And I know you're sitting there and probably you all think I'm not doing very good commercial or talking very good about Orkney. We're talking about the temperatures there. But in fact, and I promise you this, if you ever come to Orkney in the summertime and you want to have a day on the beach at Scarpa Beach, you go down there with your towel, you lie down under the Arcadian sun. I will promise you, you will go home more pale than when you arrived. There's no sun. It's in fact, well, it's actually disgraceful for some of the people up there, to be honest. That's why men in Orkney doesn't go around in shorts either. On the other hand, when you go through winter, we do have snow in Orkney. I think last year we had snow for 2 hours, and it was not even the same day. So if you want to go to Orkney for skiing, you have to be very, very quick and very, very good, to be honest. So to go to Orkney, look at the historical sites, look at Highland Park and Scarpa, and that's basically it. But for whiskey maturation, it's perfect because we don't have these big gaps between summer and winter where the cask is moving. So we are not losing 2% per year. We are losing 0.5 to 1%. But according to the Scottish law made by the Scottish Whisky Association, we are allowed to lose 2%. So my manager once took my hand and said, let's go to the warehouse and remember, we are all angels. So we keep it up to the 2%. Good. Going to the 15. This beautiful bottle, that's a new 15, 44%. A good mix of American oak and European oak, predominantly European oak, where we're using about 30 to 35% first fill. We're using approximately 15% first fill American oak. And the liquid is simply amazing. Lots and lots of tropical fruits like pineapple and pears and apples are coming out. But most, I think, is unique with this is this beautiful, creamy vanilla notes that comes out as well, which goes extremely well with the tropical fruit. And then it has a really, really good touch on the smoke early in the flavors compared to where it comes later in the 18 and the 20 or in the 12 years old. So an absolutely amazing dram. And if any one of you had the chance to taste the old 15-year-olds which we had before 2016, they're actually very similar in flavor. It's just that the new 15 had a much longer finish and is much more balanced and consistent in flavor than the old 15-year-old. So a really, really, really good product we released. It comes in this, in my opinion, very beautiful ceramic bottle. I know some people have their things about it, but wait till you hold it in your hand, see it. Pictures, videos doesn't make it justice. It's absolutely amazing in real life. So yeah.
So we're getting stock of that in mid-December.
Yeah.
And we'll do a pre-sale on it because Sam from Hancock's has got hold of some leather cases, Highland Park leather cases, which will only be available for pre-sale. So we'll get that out once we know when the ship's going to come here. The ships are very, very slow. But But that's how it is all around the world right now with things. But it's definitely, and I presented it during the London Whisky Show here last weekend, and I think it was the most poured whiskey during the whole fair, and everyone loved it. There was a few issues about the bottle, but that's how it is.
You know, to be honest, if people shows interest, whether it's good or bad, as long as they have an opinion, I'm very, very happy, because that means they have an interest. But it was not that many. I think it was 4 during the whole fair that really didn't like the bottle. They liked the core range bottle, but they, as I said, because of the liquid, they're gonna buy it anyway, because the liquid is absolutely amazing.
Nice.
That's definitely something to look forward to, and one of the great new things we have made, and it will be part of our core range, which is even better and not just a special thing. So
yeah. So for everyone else listening, it is approximately 180 Kiwi dollars retail, including the leather case. But once we know the tentative landing date, we'll start doing a pre-sale, because only a small number is coming on the first ship. Martin, before we open up for everyone else to have a bit of chat with you, or the opportunity, I just want to congratulate you on becoming a master of Quake this week. I don't know if I haven't seen any news around it, but you mentioned it before. And
yeah,
I think for others, this is 2 decades plus of dedication to Scotch whisky industry. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's well, it was a huge honor, and it was this Monday, Monday the 4th, and at Blair Castle in Scotland, and it was just good to be with all colleagues and friends from around the world. But of course, a special day to be inducted as a master. I've been a keeper since 2009. But having the whole industry, you know, telling me that I've done something okay for the last many years and made me a master, it makes me extremely proud. So thank you very much. It's a very, very big thing. But there will be something coming out in the Highland Park newsletter this month about my accolade there. So
well, I mean, it means a lot for us to be in presence of a master at Quake.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's of course, you know, there's in the industry, there's nothing much more you can receive. I had, you know, been the icon of whiskey with Whisky magazine as well in 2018 and so on, and lots of other prizes. But for me, becoming a master is definitely the biggest in the industry. So so this is I don't know if that's the time for me to retire on top, or so, but or it's a wee hint now. You have too many years in the industry. Let's but I'm definitely planning on being in the industry until they don't like me anymore or don't want me anymore. But the whiskey industry is just a great industry. When we're traveling around the world and meet colleagues from other distilleries, we are not competitors, we are friends, and we're helping each other. I remember some years ago, John Campbell from Lafroig, who's now leaving Lafroig, but we were on a ferry, one of the biggest fair in the world, on a ferry. And we were there, and John became so sick and had to leave the ferry, actually, when we were in harbour. And he said, Martin, I have 3 masterclasses with Lafroig. Can you do them? I used to work at Lafroig many, many years ago, 25 years ago, something like that. And I say, yeah, no problem. But my masterclass with Highland Park was just the class before Lafroig. So, you know, you had lots of people coming in to the Highland Park masterclass, and I was there in my shirt saying Highland Park, and then I said, well, thank you very much. And they left the room, and then they came into the Lafroig, and I was just in another shirt saying Lafroig. Well, thank you. Welcome to the Lafroig masterclass. And, you know, they're kind of, but we are helping each other as much as we can, and share ideas. And that's what the Keepers is all about as well, is to sharing best practice and help each other when we are out there. So, yeah, a huge thing and a good industry.
I think we'll start with Dave, because he's just a Highland Park super fan. I'll unpin myself. Dave, do you have some questions for Martin?
Yeah, cheers, Ash. Firstly, Martin, I just wanted to say thanks for doing this for New Zealand consumers. It's pretty rare for us to get this kind of access, so it's been super awesome having you, come and do this evening.
My pleasure.
And it's brought back a lot of memories for me of actually going to Highland Park, which is now 4 or 5 years ago, and having a tasting in the Magnus Jensen room. The question I have for you is, I've seen online and when traveling, there's a lot of single cask Highland Parks available that are usually specific to certain cities or areas, but we've never seen any down in the sort of New Zealand, Australia region. Are there any plans to bring any down here?
Yeah, well, you know what? It's a really good question. And yes, we don't have any plans, but if the our importer down there wants to have a single cask, then yes, we will definitely look into it. And I can almost 100% sure tell you that it will happen if they ask for it. We continue with the single cask program for a few more years now, but it's been there for a few years now. It was in fact something that I put back because we had a meeting in Scotland about what we could do with Highland Park and what the plans should be in the future, and I suggested that we should bring back the single casks. And because we hadn't at that time, we haven't had any single cask out for a bit over 10 years, I think it was. And our managing director, Jason Craig, he said that will never happen, because we, for every single cask we use that could cover our less good cask in, for instance, a 12-year-old or an 18-year-old, that would mean a lot. But I kept on pushing him, probably pushed him down the stairs a couple of times as well, if you ask him. But at the end of the day, he said, well, Martin, if you can choose 10 cask and let's make it as a test in the Nordics and see how it goes. And I chose 10 cask for the Nordics, and one of the cask, 628 bottles, were sold out in 3.4 seconds at the Swedish Systembolaget. So Jason called me up and said, well, I think you have a point here, let's continue. So we have continued with them, and as you can see, we have this is just some of them. That was the style we started out with. We now have the new kind of bottle type here. But again, Dave, I'm pretty sure if a request is coming in from our New Zealand importer, not sure if they're listening, send a request.
They're listening. There's 4 of them in there.
No, but it's simply just to ask and whether they want to have a hogshead, which will give us around 300 bottles, or a sherry bottle, which will give us around the 600 bottles. Find a name for it, and then we will definitely look at it and make it happen. It's a process that will take around 8 to 10 months from we find the cask till we do the bottling and all the other checks before it will reach New Zealand. But it's definitely something. If there's a request coming, we will have a look at it, and I can almost 100% sure say that it will happen.
Oh, if you're a whiskey consumer in New Zealand, you've got patience. We can definitely wait 8 to 10 months.
Yeah. So, but it, Dave, I'm 100% sure it's something we will do, definitely.
Cool. Yeah, there's I don't want to say, but yeah, something might happen in this space. There's already rumors and chats happening, which is quite cool. Yeah. Martin, in terms of Highland Park, I know before we started the video, you were saying what I like about you is, you're not a journeyman. You are Highland Park. You have literally the spirit in you, and you commented to me how obviously you are in Denmark for ease of travel, because you do travel significant amounts. But you said, whatever is the day they tell you to hang up the boots or the hat, you will be back on Orkney.
Yeah.
What's the level of fear? No trees, wind and cold, and Do you have?
Yeah, I know I didn't sell that very well, did I? No, but no, it's simply for 9 years in a row, Orkney has been voted the best place to live in UK. Well, even though it's a very small community and it's windy, it's rainy, it's cold, it's just a community that really works. As I said, people are extremely nice up there, mostly because of all the Nordic genes, of course. I can easily say that being from here as well. But it's something you need to experience yourself to see. And every year there's people from around the world moving in to Orkney because it is a unique place. I wish you would. Now Dave has been there. He would probably agree with me that it's a wonderful place. And I shall hope for you that you will be up in near future, because it is something you will fall in love with. It's something they have everything up there, even though it's a small community. And the funny thing is that all Scottish musicians or British musicians, they know that Orkney is a place where they will never have a big crowd, but they're going up there anyway, and because they know it's a very special amount of people that will come to their concerts or their shows or whatever it can be. So in Scotland, Orkney is very well known to be the best place in UK to live. I can tell you it's the place where we have the lowest unemployment in all of UK. It's a place where we have the lowest crime rate. As through Occasion told me the other day and said, well, it's almost 22 years ago we had a murder. So there's not been a murder for 22 years, and that's something that's how they measure the crime rate. We haven't had a murder for 22 years, which is unique. Everything is just working fantastic in Orkney. So, and it's a beautiful site, even though it's cold. The temperature is all about how you dress, to be honest. So that's how it is.
Does anyone want to have a bit of a chat with Martin? Please just feel free to unmute yourself and go for it. I doubt another opportunity will come for a long period of time, but Julie, do you want to have a bit of chat with Martin?
Don't be shy. I'm very far away. So
okay, if I'm going to ask something, Martin, what do you think of Highland Park aged in bourbon versus sherry?
One more time, Julie. I lost you there.
Oh, sorry, it'll be that broad Kiwi accent. What do you think of Highland Park aged in bourbon casks versus sherry casks?
Oh, well, good question. Honestly, I know we do the full range of a core range with sherry cask, but I am a huge fan of bourbon. We did Friar back in the days, which was 100% bourbon. We did Ice, which was 100% bourbon, and we did Full Volume, which was 100% bourbon. And I do like these bourbon casks a lot. I think they brings out much more of the distillery character. It's a little bit like the 10-year-old, which is American oak. And American oak seems to bring out much more of the character. But per tradition, we always used sherry cask for a core range, and that's how we continue. But for the special editions, when we use the bourbon cask, I simply love them. So huge fan of them. We have a few single cask, which has been 100% bourbon as well, first fill, of course. Simply just amazing. So to answer your question, I love bourbon cask, I love sherry, but if I had to choose my own cask from Highland Park, I would probably go for a bourbon, definitely. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. Do you have a Highland Park cask or casks?
If I have my own,
But do you already have some?
yeah.
Oh, what sort of age are we talking, Martin?
13.
Wow.
So,
Oh, yeah. Nice.
I do, but yeah, no. So I have a few. So yeah.
And does any of the Highland Park goes into the famous grouse blend?
Yeah, well, we produce about a third of what we're producing will be for famous grouse or for blended whiskey, but mostly famous grouse. We don't really produce just for famous grouse. We produce for single malt, and then we take some of it away. But we now and again send a tanker of new make spirit down to Glasgow, and then we put it into the cask they require for famous grouse. So it's the same spirit from the beginning that will go into grouse, but most of the cask for famous grouse will always be matured in Glasgow and not on site in Orkney. So yeah.
Hey, Martin, do you know anything about this leather bag? Is it like a man satchel or is it for the whiskey bottle? Julie's asking.
I've no clue about a leather bag.
Okay, well, Julie, I'll come back to you. I'll ask the team here.
Yeah.
I hope it's a man satchel. I love a Highland Park man satchel. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I don't know. But I really want to see it when it comes out. I probably need to go to New Zealand just to get one, but I would love that. So, yeah.
Actually, we had one more question. There was direct message to me. It's a two-part question. Have you tried any Kiwi whiskies, and where do you think they sort of stack up in terms of quality and prestige? Because, you know, very young industry, obviously. But there was a question. I'll find the name a bit later. Sorry, it was sent to me a little earlier ago.
Well, I have. I actually I tried. I was in Australia a few years back, and we had a Kiwi whiskey and we had an Australian whiskey, and I also tried one in Frankfurt a couple of years back. And you know, honestly, I think it's on the right track. It's definitely getting there. You always hear this, you know, people trying it, and it's the same when Danish and Swedish whiskey started, and there's all these comments, well, it's not that good, and blah blah blah. But people have to remember one thing, you know, they compare it to Scotch whiskey, and Scotch whiskey were, you know, started being made in 1494. So we have had quite a few years to make it perfectly as it is today. So having that in mind, I think they're doing really well. I think it has a great future. One of my good friends came down there. He was actually working for Highland Park at the moment, and became a distiller down in New Zealand as well.
Who was he working for, Martin?
Sorry?
Who was he distilling for?
Is it can you give me a few names?
Pokeno Distillery? Pokeno Distillery?
Yeah, he was working for one of the distillers in New Zealand.
Because we have a guy here, I forget his name, some of the boys might chime in. He has shares, or he's owner of Telebadine, and he set up a distillery here in Pokeno, just south of Auckland. And it's all very, very quiet, but they have a fully trained distiller.
Yeah, but now let's just see if he's online here. But he worked for Highland Park, and he became a distiller manager. No, not manager, distiller. Let me just see here. He, I can't find him, but he, and of course, on top of the head, I can't remember his name. But we definitely have some pretty good. How many distilleries do you have now in New Zealand?
Like in whiskey, like the key one in my mind, and no disrespect to anyone, the key one is Cardrona. It is the most Scottish distillery we have here, probably, you know, set up properly. It's got the proper stills and all that. And then we've got lots and lots of little micro distilleries doing weird and wonky experiments with big borrowed hand beaten stills, and
can't remember, was it Milford I tried recently?
We'll find a way through Sam to send you some cask samples of because for APM we released a single cask, and then we'll do more. We'd really love for you to try more Kiwi whiskies as it's maturing. Like to give you an idea, like a 2.5-year-old was just phenomenal, whereas, you know, compared to Scotch whiskey, it's quite young and quite rough still at that age. But here, it's just it's maturing very, very quickly.
But let's see, because I have his name here, Chris. The only
other one I can think of is Injured Whiskey Company, who were going to do a partnership with Spades Brewery here. And Spades was going to do the wash for them, and then they were going to do their own distillation. Injured Whiskey Company previously released these old casks. They were found in a warehouse. So
see, that's one. There was one for the Whiskey Exchange, which I can't remember, but some really good one. But no, I've tasted a few, and they're all really, really good. Why not? You have everything you need down there as well. Of course, plenty of water. You have really good barley. I'm guessing you will have some kind of peat as well.
We do.
But
we have South Island peat, but it's very, very silent. You know, it's not dominant in any way. The few distillers who've used it are definitely not dominant at all. Very gentle. And then we have Wahiki whiskey coming up online, who've been making whiskey for a little while. So Martin, another question for you. Probably could have Googled that, but what's the oldest Highland Park expression that's come out?
Yeah, well, we only bottled a 50-year-old.
Oh.
And we have done three different expressions of the 50-year-old, but we will have some older things which I can't tell too much about. There will be something older than the 50 coming out probably next year or the year after. And then in 5 years from now, we will have something even older coming out. Wow. And I can already now say that it's not gonna be cheap. So there'll probably be a good price on it. But no, the recent 50-year-old we sent out was 274 bottles. And it's going extremely well. The first one we sent out was in 2009, which again was 275 bottles, so it's in that area. And then we had one out in 2018 as well with 274 bottles. So
what sort of retail was it? Not that we would.
Well, the last one here is 20,000 pounds, UK pounds. So it's just it's a cracking whiskey, and it's after 50 years you don't have the woody flavors in it. It's simply amazing. And I remember when we did the first one in 2009, we tasted it a few years before as a 48-year-old. And we tasted it blind. We had no idea what was in our glass. And I remember having this, and we tasted it, and I was completely blown away. And I actually still get goosebumps about it, because it was such a fantastic whiskey. But again, we had no idea what was in our glass. And we sent it as a 49-year-old. We sent it to the International Wine and Spirit Competition, not as one of the products they had to vote on or judge, but just to have their opinion on what it was. Was it good and so on. So we didn't tell them where it was from. We didn't tell the age of it. We didn't tell if it was Irish, Scottish, New Zealand, or whatever it could be. They just got this whiskey in their hand and said, "Can you please tell us, what do you think?" Because something, when you find a 50-year-old cask, or few of them, you are blinded by your own product. You will just think it's good. And one of the judges, he said, he wrote about it, and he said, "This is as close to perfection than any whiskey will ever be." So with these words, I was kind of, it was just, we knew we had something right. And it is honestly one of the best whiskeys if not the best whiskey I've ever tried. That's the 50-year-old. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the only close to 50-year-old I've ever liked was the 47-year-old Longmorn. It was a Gordon MacPhail release.
Yeah.
Otherwise, most whiskeys I've tried over 40-year-old have been a bit flat.
Yeah.
In saying that, I haven't tried many. Yeah.
No, but what happens when you come up to, I'm not saying in general, but sometimes what happens when you come up to 40 and above is that now, we're talking about the distillery character. We're talking about the wood influence or the cask influence. But when the wood, not the cask and its extractives, but when the wood start taking over, then you should have bottled it before, because when it's wood, it gets very dry. It gets a little bit sulfury as well, and there's a lot of notes that comes in. And not to say, and you must understand, I'm not saying anything bad about other whiskies, but there will be whiskies on the market where you, when you taste them, you would probably think, should have been bottled a few years back. But as it's whiskey that's collective and so on, and for collectors and these kind of things, then they will sometimes bottle it and hope that people will never open them. And that's a big issue in the industry when we come up in age. But I still think, honestly, in my 32 years in the industry, we're talking about 2 or 3 bottles where I thought, should have been different. And you have to remember, I used to work at the Craigellachie Hotel in Scotland, which was the biggest whiskey bar and with the most rare whiskies at that time. So I tasted some really, really rare whiskies all the time. But yeah, all good in their own kind of way. So yeah.
And sorry, just one question, Dave, because I'll forget. I went to the Highland Park website just now and noticed for the first time, what's this about being a boxing champion? Could you just talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, well, I'm still running a boxing club in Denmark, where I'm now, of course, too old to box, but I'm the coach. But when I boxed myself, I was Danish champion 2 times and had 42 international fights, I think it was at that time. Yeah, very, very few defeats. So I used to box a lot, and of course now I'm too old. I'm too heavy, but I have a boxing club I run besides my my whiskey here.
Mm.
For me, it's still it's a way to relax. It's a way to get my mind off things when I'm traveling. Simply just fantastic. So
Yeah. And what's with the Highland Park tattoo? Is that something you did out of your free will, or
yeah,
was
absolutely. I never told anyone at the distillery I got it, or at our team, and it was simply because at that time there was two things in it. My ex-wife had her name was Heidi, so that age could I was riding a Harley, and I loved Highland Park. So the age there stand for quite a few things, but mostly it was my love to Highland Park, and I got the tattoo, and it became we did a picture which was way through my will. I didn't want to do it, but we had a photographer in Orkney to take a lot of pictures for us, and I had to show him around. And one day our managing director was with us as well, and we drove out to a place called Markvardsen in Orkney, and it was simply just cold. It was really cold. You had the Atlantic Ocean spreading the water all around the cliffs, and I was standing there, and then Jason looked at me and he said, "Take off your shirt." I said, "What?" "Take off your shirt." "Here, never." So, "Come on, take off your shirt. Do it for the company." And I thought, well, I'll take off my shirt. And then the photographer took a picture, which became a very iconic picture for Highland Park, with me standing there with my tattoo, and very hairy, but that's how it is. And the most, can we say, amusing thing for a managing director, this was early in the morning, and I was standing there, and the minute I took off my shirt, a bus full of Japanese tourists arrived to the same place. And there I was standing, almost naked, with the wind coming in. And the first thing you just heard people saying was, "Oh, see, Rambo." And so I was there, and it was not Viking or anything; it was Rambo. Yeah, but
yeah. Just in an attempt to embarrass her, that question request was from my Highland Park sales rep. Infatuation with this tattoo, clearly.
But
Karen, that was for you.
But fair enough. No, I got the tattoo back in 2007, I think, so quite a few years back. And we actually talked about a few years ago, or I would say my director talked about a few years back, to change the amulet we have with the H in it. And I was sitting in at the office in Glasgow when we talked about it, and he came up with a new design, and I said, "Don't you dare," because now I got that tattoo, so don't you dare changing that amulet. And he said, "Well, yeah, you might have a point, but looking back, I'm very, very happy I didn't work for Kentucky Fried Chicken or anything. If I wanted to have a logo, then or Lidl, then I'm very happy for the logo today. It's
nice.
It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, did you have another question, Dave?
Yeah, I'm just curious, because obviously I think getting the opportunity to have Martin here is pretty rare. For mortal men, so 50-year-old whiskies being out the window here, what would be the unicorn Highland Park for you? So if we said £500, 1,000 New Zealand dollars, where should we go? What is the ultimate expression, in your opinion?
Well, Dave, that's a huge question, but I would put it this way. I always go back to the 18. I think the 18 is really good. A new 21, absolutely amazing. If you count auctions as well, then the Bicentenary,
Ooh.
our 200 years anniversary bottle. That's a 21 as well, but probably besides the 50-year-old, the best, one of the best whiskeys I've ever tried. Of course, that's auctions, but 21, 25 is always something really, really nice. I think so. Yeah. There is the old 30-year-old. Again, if you can find that on auctions, that will be really nice as well. So yeah. So yeah, so quite a few whiskies I would go for, but as an everyday dram at home, I use my 12. For special occasions, I go for the 18, and if it's really special occasions, I would probably go for 21 today. So I'm in the position that I'm fortunate enough to be able to taste the 50-year-old very often because I do tastings with it, but I'm also in a position where I can't afford it. So it's not something I sit and drink every night, and the same with the new 30 and the 40. But it's definitely something that I look forward to taste, but not something I would buy. And you also have to look at it this way. You know, when you come up in the price scale as the 50 and even the 40 and so on. Will any whiskey be worth to £20,000? You know, if you want to drink it, and I don't think so, to be honest. I think it's fantastic to try it, and that's why I always tell you know, the different bars, exclusive bars around the world, you know, they should try to buy the 50-year-old, make a whiskey dinner out of it, and have the 50-year-old for a dinner, for people to try it and to get people in. And even though it's going to be an expensive tasting, I've done a massive amount of them all around the world, and it's a chance for people to be able to taste it and say, well, I've been there, I've tried it, but it's also a chance for the different bars and restaurants to kind of say, well, okay, let's try this and do it this way. And it, you know, all the things, I'm actually doing one in Sweden on Saturday, and it's already sold out. It's been for a few months, and the bar breaks even on it, but make money on the beer and the food people are buying next to it. So yeah, and that's the way to do it. And then of course they will always have a wee bit left in the bottle for them to sell afterwards. And it's just like this, you know, if you go into a bar, if they have all these bottles standing on the shelves, you will never choose one that's not open. You always choose the one that's open. So yeah, that's the thing. So, but to answer Dave, of what we have out right now, if I wanted to treat myself good, the 21 or the 25, definitely. On auctions, Bicentenary or the old 30, yeah, definitely. So.
Well, thank you. And I totally agree with you on the 12-year-old. It's such a. I put a note in the comments tonight, and I noticed Ash responded as well. It's the whiskey that made me fall in love with whiskey, and every time I go back to it, it just reminds me of that.
Yeah. No, it's really, really good, and we see that again. 12 and 18 is what people kind of goes back to. So, yeah.
I think Bevan had a question as well. Bevan.
Echo, I do just want to echo what everyone else has sort of said. So Martin, it has been absolutely awesome to have you on this. It's really cool for particularly us who don't often get to see distilleries thousands of miles away, and just even to have the opportunity to talk to someone like you. Really do appreciate you giving us your time. So apologies, I was working a bit and trying to listen at the same time on this, but I know you talked about sort of your barley and your sourcing of that and your warehouses. But I didn't hear too much on the yeast. I don't know if you sort of touched on that. So I'd just be quite curious to know. So from like going back in history, was it wild yeast? Was it sort of made there, cultivated there, and that sort of journey?
Yeah, going back in time, the yeast would have been wild yeast. It would have been everything from baker's yeast, brewer's yeast, whatever we could use up through the days. So the yeast is, well, of course the barley as well, but looking at the yeast, that's been the biggest journey of changes in the history of the distillery. But for the last 20 plus years, we've been using Carry M and Carry MX yeast, which one works fast and one works quicker to begin with, and then the one works a little bit longer at the end. But Carry M and Carry MX is what suits us best, and that's distiller's yeast, both of them. But again, you will have some of the new distilleries will try out with brewer's yeast, and we had a few distilleries that made research on baker's yeast and these kind of things as well. But distiller's yeast is what we use today, but you're absolutely right. Going back to process, Magnus would probably have been using nature's yeast, and then going up through time if it changed to, of course, more reliant yeast types and also consistency in what we're making. So yeah.
Nice. So, because Cara and Bevan, they do a lot of 8 p.m. virtual tastings. They've actually made whiskey of their own as well. And just yesterday, I got a sample from them, which I haven't tried yet. But I have respect for people who make whiskey, because it's quite a process. Everyone wants to jump forward to the finish.
Yeah, but I think Ash, to be honest, to open up a new distillery today, no matter where it is in the world, is a very, very brave thing. And open up a new distillery in Scotland is probably even braver, to be honest, because they're up against these massive companies that will of course be able to sell products a little bit cheaper and so on as well. But looking at the amount of distilleries opening up around the world at the moment, I think it's brave. I'm not sure, and I hope you understand me right. I'm not sure I would say it's clever, but I definitely think it's brave, because it's unless you have another income, whether it's beer or gin or whatever, if you rely 100% on your whiskey production, well, it will be 3 years until you can call it whiskey, where you don't have an income. And then before it's really drinkable, you might have to wait another 6 or 8 years. So it's a very long process. And what we do tend to see is that a lot of these new distilleries, when they start selling their product either as new make or casks or as a 3-year-old, the price for a 50 cl bottle will be the same as a 20-year-old Highland Park in 70 cl now and again, And I was a consultant for a distillery that should open up in Denmark, and I said, well, you have to look at it this way: when you start your process and you start selling out the bottles, would you rather just sell one bottle and then people were happy about having that for collection, or would you go for a product where people say, you know what, I'm going to buy one more because it's that good. And he said, no, my idea is that people will buy it to drink and so on. So, well, then don't do what you're about to do, sell it as a 3-year-old, because people will not buy bottle number 2. And that's just how it is. So he actually he invested in a warehouse, and he will not sell any whiskey until it's 12 years old. So thank God he listened to that, because that's the biggest mistake I think most distilleries do, is that they will sell. I'm not saying it will be bad, but it will just not be as good as a 12-year-old, for instance. And then they sell it, and right away, if it's not that drinkable, they will kind of lose the credibility for further whiskies coming out. And that's a shame when they have spent all these money and effort into making something really good. So you have to be true to yourself when you open up a new distillery, and find the right way. And best if you could have another income, or have a good friend that's an accountant to work it out for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're seeing a flood of the gin at the moment from all parts of the world. It's out of control, and it's very hard as a retailer because you can't say no to anyone. But gin seems to be the quick way to just get some dollars through the till.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. We see a lot of distilleries that will send out gin with all kind of flavors and experiments they've done, which is fine if that's the way they can make an income towards a good whiskey. I think that's right, and especially as you say, no maturation required for gin. You distill and you open up for the tap, and you have the bottle underneath, more or less, and that's how you do it. Not saying anything bad about gin. It's the way it's done, and if you don't make gin, you make vodka, or you make aquavit, or whatever it can be to make that. Some distillers have started producing beer to get it going, and it's fine. I just need to tell that most of the new distillers out there, they need to think about when they release their whiskey. Because it will come back to them either good or bad, depending on what they release. Most of the distilleries today will, of course, send out products that are okay. But I've just tried some whiskies that were not as good as they could have been. And that's the next process. It's good that it gets some age to it, but they also need to invest. And I will actually say that's probably the most important thing. That's to invest in good cask from the beginning. You can make the best new make in the world, but if you put it into bad cask, you will get a bad whiskey. You can make an okay new make, but if you put it into really, really good cask, you will get a first-class whiskey. So it's the cask that decides as well where to go with your products as well.
So what's your definition of a good cask then, Martin?
Yeah, well, that's probably the most or the best questions in the world. But a cask is a cask that has been treated the right way, still have lots of flavors in it. The wood has been good from the beginning. What I tend to see is that a lot of new distillers don't have the finance to invest in first fill cask or fresh oak. So they will buy cask, refill cask, that might have been used 3 or 4 or 5 times. They will buy wood from markets where the liquid that has been into before has either been there too long or have made the wood bad. And that could be especially something from some Hungarian wine, which will really give the wood some bad noses and smell to it, and also which will never go very well with any whiskies. So a good cask could either be fresh virgin oak, where you can treat it the way you want. You can either put sherry into it yourself, but also a first fill sherry cask, where you know that the sherry hasn't been into the cask for a long time. That means don't take a cask that comes from a Solera system, because that would have been used for a too long time. And even though fortified wine doesn't made a huge effect on the wood, if it's been used for a long time, it will have an effect. So it's not always good to buy a 20-year-old sherry cask that's been used for sherry for 20 years, because most of the flavors from the oak will have disappeared over that amount of years. There's cask brewers which you can rely on, and then there's cask brewers which makes money, and that's where they have to go. But best of all, if they can get their own contact to sherry bodegas, to bourbon industry, or to other distillers that they only use the cask once or twice, it's that's the good thing. You will be able to know a good cask, and it's something that, you know, if the day I'm not working for Highland Park anymore, that's some of the things that I will put my effort into. That's pick out good cask for different distilleries, definitely.
Can I ask another quick question? Sorry, it's just because I noticed one thing that, you know, you go on virtual tours, you look at all the things there, they always talk about all their equipment and everything, but they always sort of neglect talking about the maintenance that's sort of required to keep like the building, the stills, and all those things up to. So from, you know, from a big distillery like you guys, what, like, is that actually like a very frequent kind of thing that you've got to constantly keep, you know, like, how does your maintenance work across your whole system, across all your warehouses to your stills, to how does that?
Well, you know, our maintenance is done well, frequently, I would say, but once a year we close down for 4 weeks. And during that, during the 4 weeks during summer, where the water supply is normally very low, this is where we go through all the technical things, and that means repairing stills, repairing all the pipes and whatever we can. Warehousing, the warehouses will be done very frequently, because we don't want any leaks, we don't want water to come down, and these kind of things. So that I would say is probably every month we go through all the warehouses to see if they're free. We only have 23 warehouses, so it's not a big deal at Highland Park. It's worse at Macallan, I would say. But when it comes to the repair of the stills, if the copper in our stills is not good enough, we'll simply just close down the still and we'll repair it right away. We have people coming up down from Speyside, from Forsyth, which is the best still maker, coppersmith in Scotland, and he will repair it. But if it can wait till the 4 or 5 weeks we have during summer, then everything will be done there. We will simply close down the distillery. We will still do tours, but we will also tell people there will be no production on site in that period. So 4 or 5 weeks a year is where we do all the repairing and keep that up to date. And it's normally, when I'm saying besides the warehouse, it's of course, it's normally enough for the repairment we do that. But you never know. There could always be something. We had just before COVID kicked in, and you have to remember, you know, we are on an island to get people up to repair things for us. It's not something they do within an hour. You know, that's something that will be done within a couple of weeks. You know, so. And our mash tun, which is a mashing machine we have, simply didn't do the work we wanted. And even though we have engineers on site, we simply couldn't find out what was wrong. and was simply just a small measurement, measuring the temperatures in the water that came in, and when the water had to go out through the mash tun there. But it didn't show anything wrong until our engineer from Speyside came up and measured everything with all his instruments. And at that time, of course, if we can't do any mashing, we can't do any production. So we were closed down for a few weeks due to that, which of course cost us thousands of liters of alcohol. But that's how it is. But normally it's enough with the 4 to 5 weeks during summer. And this summer here has been a little bit more, as for the first time in many years, we ran out of water. And not only us, all of Orkney ran out of water because it didn't rain for almost 2 months. So even back home, when you wanted to have a glass of water, couldn't be done. So we had to rely on people coming up with water tanks in Orkney. So it's been quite a dramatic summer for that. And of course, that's something, no matter how much maintenance you do and all these kind of things, if there's no water in the ground and from the spring we're using, well, you're just lost. And that's talking about whiskey production. The most important thing in the whiskey production is the water, because without water, you can't produce. And that's how it is. So we have had plenty of time this summer to do even more than we normally do, but it's normally a 4 to 5 week period during summer we do that.
So how many barrels
do you have on hand to blend?
Yeah, like in terms of, so across your 24, your measly 24 warehouses, these pitiful ones you've got, how many barrels do you sort of have in each one, roughly?
Well, it's very, very different sizes. We have 46,000 casks on site at the moment, which is quite a few liters of alcohol. Our biggest warehouse is 3,000 casks.
So you can spare the cask for New Zealand, is what you're saying?
That's
what I'm hearing.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
No, so a good amount of cask is lying there, and we do every second year. We do it every year, but we take half 1 year and the other half the next year, just to see if they're good enough, to see if they're leaking and these kind of things. So we go through them, yeah. So,
and I think Archie had a question as well. Archie, did you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Hey, Martin.
Hi, Archie.
Like everyone else has said, I mean, this has been great. Just
good
listening to what you've got to say about Highland Park and whiskey in general. It's been a fantastic time. The question I've got is not specific to Highland Park, but it's one that relates to a whiskey that split the purists and those who are of more of an adventurous nature. There was a whiskey that was around maybe about a decade ago called Kudu. Just wondering what your thoughts on that are and whether you had an opportunity to try it, because I do believe its origins are from Denmark as well.
Yeah, no, Kudu, well, it's from the Speyside Distillery, but it was a Danish importer that had it made, and it comes from Manachmore in Scotland many years ago. Made a whiskey called Loch Du, which was the black whiskey called the Black Sea, and it's one of these whiskies where I normally say anything bad about other products, but it's not a whiskey that's for my palate. I said that very gentle here. It's a black whiskey, and the thing is, they and I have it here, not the whiskey, but they say the color will come from the charring inside a cask. That's the black color, but that actually doesn't give any color. It's the wood behind that will give the color to a whiskey. This is just to open up for the color. So to get such a black whiskey from the color is not really doable, but you can get it. by using a lot of this, the caramel. So I'm not a huge fan of neither Lochdu or Kudu, which means black dog Kudu. But I think it's fun to try, and I think it's what the whiskey industry needs now and again, something that's very, very different and not just traditional. But Archie, I'm sorry to say, it was not a whiskey. It's not a whiskey I would use for my tastings, and it's not a whiskey that I will buy a second bottle of. Let me just put it this way. So very gentle. So, but again, credit for their trying. Yeah, definitely.
In terms of the original one was the Lochdu, the story that was perpetuated was that it was a mistake. Can you corroborate that, or was it intentional?
No, well, I think it might have started out as a mistake, but I think it turned out to be intentional further down the line, because they sold it for quite a few years, and it goes okay on auctions when with the price as well, but it as far as I know, it became illegally because they found out they were using more other kind of colors than E150A, which is the caramel color, to get that black color, and you're not allowed to put anything else inside the whiskey. So I think Mannock Moore, Diageo, was asked to take it off the market when that was discovered. How could you the black dog there, how that could be back on the market from Speyside Distillery, I don't know, and I'm actually not sure they will produce it again. Speyside Distillery, I think it's off the market as well, but it's been a while since I've seen it, at least. But again, it's worth a try. It's something, it did have fans. There was people that that liked it, and fair enough. If people buy it, people enjoy it. That's the most important thing. So, but it didn't fit my palate.
Yeah, it was one that I quite enjoyed, but it was also it was quite a good bottle as well to test out on other people and get their take on it. And it did cause, when we had friends around, it did cause quite some divisions, because some folk were like, I'm not touching that, and others were like, oh yeah, I'm game for it, I'll give it a go. But yeah, it was I think it was just a nice twist. Maybe classed as a gimmick, but I would agree with you. I don't think we'll see it again. But personally, I quite enjoyed it. But it's not necessarily something I would reach for every night of the week. It'll be a kind of special occasion or a fun occasion.
But there's been a few I would call them experiments, and probably also from Highland Park. We've done things that I know that some people didn't like. Our port wine cask was kind of a split decision between people, but you can't win them all. And I think both with Lochdu and Kudu that some people liked it. I didn't particularly love it, but I think it was a good try, and I think it definitely deserves to be on the market as long as it's within the rules of making Scotch whiskey. Definitely.
With your obviously the Edrington link there between Highland Park and Macallan, where do you sit on the is Old Perth is the mix right between the Highland Park and Macallan?
Yeah, well, I think it, I like that particular one. I think that was a great whiskey. But again, why? I would say, of course, you could say why not, but if the Highland Park cask was good enough from the beginning and the Macallan was good enough from the beginning, why put them together? Why not just have them as they are? But again, I like the whiskey for what it was. Old Perth is, and some good friends of mine that runs it. So it, I'm not allowed to say anything bad about it. but no, it's a good product. It's tasty. And that's sometimes what you have to look at, not what's inside, but just what, you know, is it drinkable? Is it okay? And then go for that one. So, but the Macallan is good on its own, and Highland Park is good on its own. So, yeah, I probably prefer them split up like that.
But just sorry, go on, Bevan, because I'm hogging.
No, carry
You
on.
fanboy, you, Dave.
Well, I'm here in my Highland Park polo, so it's
Yeah, it looks nice. Yeah. So
I got it. It's a little side note. When I went up to Orkney on that trip, I literally had landed in Aberdeen without really knowing how far from Aberdeen to the ferry it was. And you're right, like once you get over the hill past Inverness, it just becomes incredibly flat, incredibly narrow, and it takes forever. And the lady in the shop, I did the Magnus Unis tasting because it was, as you say, it's a pilgrimage. And she was like, "How long are you here for?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm here for 3 days." And she's like, "What have you got?" Because I had a t-shirt and a polo, and I was in shorts, I think, on the day. And I was like, you know, it's summer, so I brought my summer kit. And she's like, "Yeah, it's Orkney." And she actually gave me the fleece hoodie at the shop, the big polo fleece. And she was like, "You're gonna need this, son. Do some research next time."
Yeah, no, but that's the truth. And you know, we have every summer we have around 180 to 200 cruise ships coming into Orkney from around the world. And it's also it's so fun, you know. It's kind of a tourist attraction to go down to the harbor to see the cruise ships coming in, because you see all these Americans coming down the ship, and then they go in their shorts and their t-shirts into Kirkwall, and then 15 minutes later you see them go back to the ship and change their clothes, and then coming back into town. So they're all starting out in their shirts and their short sleeves, but they will all go back and change or buy clothes in Kirkwall. It's a fantastic place, but it is a little bit chilly. So yeah. But good they took care of you in the shop. I'm happy to hear that. So yeah.
I know Sam's listening in between, but I would really love to do another version of this, Martin, at some point in future with some samples in front of us.
Yeah, definitely.
Could Edrington Group please, you know, work with Hancock's NZ, and because this is the biggest group of people I've ever gathered without any whiskey in front of them. I know they're drinking something in front of them, but you and I are the only ones who've got drams. But it'd be so good, you know, even if we throw in maybe a cask strength sample and the core range, it will be very enjoyable, you know, 40-50 packs.
No, but I think it's been great, and I think you know, you can see I've been talking for 3 hours more or less.
3 hours.
And
you say two. We're stolen an hour from you.
No, but it's been flying away, which has been fantastic. And you know, it's always when you're in good company, it's easy. Definitely, I would love to take that up to you know, with Edrington, what we can do in the future, and get some samples out. But it will always be my pleasure to be back again, Ash. No problem. So just let us find a day and let's see what we can do.
Yeah, definitely. I think
but hopefully I will be able to fly down to New Zealand and see you all in person.
That will be a dream scenario. We'll do an 8 p.m. version of this in person. And I'm sure you've met him. We had Alan Winchester here from Glenlivet just before COVID hit, and it was one of the best nights of my life. You know, people yourselves who are in the industry and have done the 20, 30, 40 years, your stories are, you know, they just, I mean, look at the time, 3 hours of flown without an effort. You guys are, the stories are just on a different level, and we love them.
Yeah, no, but it's a pleasure, and Alan and I, we are good friends, and I know him pretty well, so and he well, he has some stories to tell as well, I know that. But I think it all comes down to the passion we have for what we're doing, and that's why we are in the whiskey world for such a long time. Basically because the people that are in the industry are absolutely fantastic, but also you never be fully educated. I might have the title as master, as you mentioned earlier, but I learn every day. There's always something new. We learn at the distillery every day. Just look at what I talked about, the peat and the fire setting down, and less peat, and we get the same ppm value. We learn every day about casks, warehousing, and these kind of things. So you never be fully educated as a whiskey man or girl, for that matter. So there's always new things to reach out for. Right now we're working quite a lot with different casks, type of wood from different places around the world, different extractives and these kind of things as well, what have been in the cask before. Because with all the new distilleries that open up, with all the new distilleries expanding, there will be a lack of cask in the future. And therefore it's good to be on a track looking for new type of cask that might in the future can replace sherry cask or bourbon casks and whatever it can be. So it's something, it's a fantastic industry to be part of. Meeting all you guys, I know behind each other's screens here, but hopefully in future be able to come down and meet you all in person and have a go for the same tasting, but also be able to have a wee bit of laugh down there as well. So there's lots of things we can do, and lots of things in the industry we can learn about still, which is good.
Martin, may I just quickly make a quick statement and just one last question, I promise.
Yeah.
Statement being is, we are a very small country. Like, it's sometimes very hard to explain to suppliers and distributors sometimes, how small a country we are. We've got 5 million people with a lot of children out of the 5 million who don't drink. A lot of people who do drink, but they drink beer and wine and premix drinks. So the percentage of the 5 million who drink at this level is very tiny, but it is a very well-educated whiskey community. We know what we like, we know what we don't like. We don't, like when the new distilleries show their wares, we see through the marketing very quickly because we've been drinking some of the finest like Highland Park and Macallan for some time. So, but sometimes people forget how small community we are, but we're very passionate. When there's things like single casks come and special releases come, and I'm sure the 15-year-old will come, people will jump on it. Just the one last question I had, and this is a bit of a funny one. Please take it with a bit of grain of salt. And there's a lot of pressure on being green and don't burn coal and this and that. Do you think there will be a time when they would say don't burn the peat because just purely for humorous reasons? Would they say no, we can't allow peating of the
Yeah, well, believe me, we've thought about that, but you also have to remember it's Scotland, and whiskey is solely the most or the highest export for Scotland. And if we change the flavors, and that means the peat, then I don't think people will buy it the same way as they do. Of course, there's a lot of unpeated whiskies out there. We own one like Macallan, but there's a huge amount of people that will still enjoy the peated whiskey. I think there will be restrictions about how much peat we can cut per year. And that means that for us, just to give you an idea, we have a limit. We're allowed to cut 300 ton per year of the peat. Right now, we're only using 100 ton per year. So we are way under the amount that we're allowed to. But if you go to Isla, for instance, where they have all these distilleries that are using peat, there might be a limit there, a restriction for what they are allowed to cut in the near future. And that might mean that you will have, and we're now talking, years to come, because you have to remember what we are bottling today was produced 10, 12, 30 years ago. But 20 years from now, maybe, we might have unpeated Lafroig, we might have unpeated Ardbeg, which have been out there with Gildalton and these kind of things, but or less peated. So it will be a different time, but I don't think they will remove it completely from us. There has been research. There has been talk about using artificial smoke, but we tried that as an experiment, and it's far, and I mean really, really far from the natural products. It's not something that we will be able to do in the future. And then of course they have to change the law about making whiskey, about the ingredients that we can put into it.
Thank you so much, Martin, and congratulations once again on your
thank you.
New accolade. And I hope at some point next year we can get some access to you again with some whiskey.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely hope that. So yeah.
I also want to just say a quick thank you to Sam. I know he's been listening there, but he's been the main guy who's put this all together. So thank you, Sam, for bringing us all together. I'll find a way of getting this recording onto YouTube and share the link with everyone. And as the 15 comes along, we'll share all that information on 8 p.m. and through the email database. Otherwise, thank you so much. 3 hours of amazing journey, mates. That was just incredible. Yeah,
I enjoyed it. It was great, and it was good to see you all. Keep in touch, and find me on Facebook. I have my senior brand ambassador Martin Markvarsden side there. Log into that. Log into our inner circle where you'll be able to see all these.
Yeah, so very quickly, go on the Highland Park website and you'll find the program that do the inner circle, and you will get a pin and a card of registration. Yeah, but I'll put that in the email as well for everyone.
Yeah, and regarding the pin, don't be worried. It might take a few years before you get it. We are based in Orkney. They are not the quickest people in the world. It's a beautiful place to be, but it takes a wee while. So, but thank you for having me. I truly enjoyed it, and we'll keep in touch. Definitely.
And I'll raise a glass for your good health, and hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Right. This is the awkward part. I'll have to end the call now. See you, Martin.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.